Hello everybody, hope you're all doing well. It's Lane here with MetaShackle. Today we're going to be taking a look at XRP and Bitcoin, as well as the liquidation heat maps, as we've had quite the rally in prices today, even though the government shut down, which I think is fabulous, and it's just unfortunate that it can't stay that way, as most governments around the world have become tyrannical, as our founding fathers spoke about. But regardless, let's not waste any more time and let's get into the charts. For additional information and exclusive perks, do consider joining me and the rest of our community on Patreon. First off, taking a look at Bitcoin here, we're looking at the daily chart. You can see that we did get a very nice green candle right here, breaking off of the 50% mark or the center line within the Gaussian channel. Now we are starting to get a bit of a divergence in this area here, coming off of this point right here to the current price. So we definitely want to keep an eye on this here because this could signal a potential reversal to the downside. It doesn't mean that it has to be extreme or anything, but we want to see this indicator get up above this to negate it. But it's definitely something that I'll be keeping my eye on. Now swinging over to the 4-hour chart, another thing that we definitely want to keep an eye on is the fact that we have this CME gap right here in yellow, which has not quite filled yet. We also have a bearish fair value gap right here, which has the potential to act as a breaker block, which means that price could get rejected and pushed to the downside. But on top of that, we have this entire pattern crowned with a bearish order block, which is very large in size, moving all the way up to 123,260 range, which definitely will not be easy to get through. But if for whatever reason price can eventually get up through this bearish order block, whether it's in this move or after a consolidation period, the resistance up above this is very light. So we definitely want to watch this because I've been talking about this CME gap being filled for quite some time. And regardless if it works out bullish or bearish, I have a plan for each potential outcome because I certainly don't know what the future is going to be, but I have an idea of what I'm going to do depending on what it does. So we definitely want to watch this, the CME gap, the potential breaker block, and this bearish order block on the daily. Now moving over to the liquidation heat map, this is the 3-month chart. You can see that we have a very thick band of liquidity right here on the chart at about 118,950, with additional liquidity even above that area, moving up into about that 120 area. Then it starts to get breaks between the additional liquidity up into that 121 area, even moving up in here into this area at about 122, and spreading out very thin up above this. But it's probably very likely that we're at least going to come and get this 119,000 range, and it's right in this area here, which would actually fill that CME gap and start pushing into that potential breaker block. But it seems to make sense that if it's going to come up for that, it would reach up just a little bit further and at a minimum take out this liquidity right here as well before any kind of a correction. But we'll have to see how it goes. Now jumping over and taking a look at the Bitcoin exchange liquidation map, we can see on the 30-day that price is trading right here where the red arrow is, that there is quite a bit of liquidity in that same area that we were just talking about, up into that 120, 123 range, but it does start to swing to the downside pretty dramatically after hitting this point right here at 118,967. There is quite a bit of liquidity resting below the current price, coming down here into that 104,000, 105,000 range. So just quickly looking at this map here, you can see that there is a lot of liquidity resting right here that probably looks pretty enticing to those market makers, especially after this right here gets taken. So if this liquidity gets taken and the price starts to reverse, there's a very good chance that we could see a sharp move to the downside to clean the rest of this up as well. So that's definitely something that I would think about. Now jumping over to take a look at the XRP chart. This is also on the daily. You can see right here that the Gaussian channel had actually turned red with the price breaking below the 50% line. We are now approaching that area. This first candle got rejected right off of it, but we have yet to throw a green candle on the daily. Now if you look at the Gaussian channel, a lot of people don't know this, but it will give you clues. Oftentimes, when the Gaussian channel turns red, price breaks below the 50% line, moves down, Oftentimes, certainly not every time, it will throw a green candle, pull back just a little bit before we see the move up and out of the red portion of the Gaussian channel before it turns green. So you can see here that it flashed green, price fell back and consolidated for a few days, flashed green again, then broke out. We see the same thing here as price broke below the Gaussian channel, flashed a green candle, consolidated for nearly 2 weeks before throwing another green candle and breaking up and out. Even though it wasn't as sustainable as this breakout was, it still followed that same type of pattern. We see the same thing here with the price coming up, throwing a green candle, consolidating, breaking out. In this case, it threw the green candle after going red and then immediately broke out but had heavy retracement. Same thing here. Price broke below, threw a green candle, retraced, broke out to the upside. So when you're watching the daily chart in regard to the Gaussian channel, one of the things you want to watch for is that first green candle. It's definitely something that I look for. But we have not flashed it yet. But I will be looking for it to flash. And when we add all of the junk that I usually put on my charts that make it incredibly clustered and messy, you can see that we're still well on our way in regards to the dragon pattern that I've been talking about. Literally nothing has changed on this pattern in regard to the last couple of times that I've talked about it. The wave 1 termination is holding. The wave 4 termination is holding. Price consolidated, broke out here, and is moving right up against that 50% line in the Gaussian channel. As it sits right now, it's looking great. Although it is kind of tricky to get the proper counts going on in here. For the Elliott wave right now, once I've got it locked down, I'll go over that in a little bit more detail. But until that point, all we have to know is we don't want to see this wave 1 termination taken out. But as it sits right now, we are right on track. Now jumping over to take a look at the XRP Liquidation Heatmap. This is the 1 month. We can see that there's quite a bit of liquidity resting on the chart up above current price. We have a thick band resting right here at about $3.02, but it's also surrounded by quite a bit of additional liquidity. The thickest band of liquidity on the chart that we can see here is actually sitting at $3.20. In comparison to what's resting below the current price, you can see that the vast majority of the liquidity is actually to the upside, which goes right in line with what we're seeing on the XRP Daily Chart in regard to the dragon pattern / Elliott wave triangle pattern, because we're going to need this liquidity acting as fuel to push us to the upside to break out of that pattern to give us the longest primary fifth wave possible. There's definitely quite a bit of liquidity resting up here. Now jumping over and looking at the XRP exchange liquidation map, it tells pretty much the same story. Looking quite a bit different than what we were seeing on the Bitcoin chart, we can see that the vast majority of liquidity is resting above current price in the form of short liquidation leverage, although there is still quite a bit of long liquidation leverage resting below the current price. And if my theory about having a 4-tier cycle actually comes to fruition, with liquidity running out of Bitcoin into Ethereum, then from Ethereum into XRP, then from XRP into the altcoins, creating a 4-tier cycle rather than the 3-tier cycle that we've been accustomed to, this might be tipping us off a little bit to the possibility of that coming to fruition, with most of the liquidity on Bitcoin resting below current price and with XRP exhibiting the exact opposite symptoms, with most of the liquidity resting above current price. If we do see the CME gap filled on Bitcoin and it starts to move to the downside, there may be a point of divergence here where XRP continues to move upward and Bitcoin starts to gradually work downwards, with the two diverging from one another. That's certainly not set in stone, but I'm looking at it as a potential option for the way price could move. Something perhaps similar to what we saw after the Trump election, when XRP just tore off up into the clouds and Bitcoin literally just sat there and kind of watched. So we do have precedent for XRP making major gains against Bitcoin, but this is something that we'll have to watch. I think it would be very interesting if we saw XRP break to the upside while Bitcoin started to gradually move down, as money came out of Bitcoin and Ethereum pumping into XRP, then eventually seeing this primary fifth wave completed with money coming out of Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, and flooding into the altcoins. But none of us know exactly how this is going to unfold. Nobody knows the future. We're all just looking at the information that we have, sharing ideas, and trying to get the best read on things that we possibly can so that we can make the best possible decisions for ourselves in regard to our investments. So this is just one thing that I've been looking at, and I think it's very interesting how it's kind of starting to really reveal itself and lean in that potential direction. And if you've been thinking about spot trading, leverage trading, or you're just looking for a place to swap your cryptos without all the excessive fees, you definitely want to take a look at Bitunix. You'll really be glad that you did. I trade there every day, and it's the only place that I swap cryptos. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Please do me a favor and hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. Have a great day.